Hello, everybody. Welcome to the 5th episode of the Trigger Words Podcast. I'm glad you're with me. If you really are out there, I'm doing this pretty late at night. You might have a life. I don't. I get to spend it with my family, got the kids in bed, got other things done around the house. And I said, you know what? I've got to get up and get this week's episode recorded. So I'm up here on Facebook Live. If anyone out there is going to listen in too, go ahead and make some comments. Sorry for it being so late. I'll try to get them at a more reasonable time so you guys can participate. I'm still trying to figure out what days that these live shows are going to go up versus when the actual podcast is going to be released on things like iTunes and Google Play and stuff like that. So right now you're in the pre-show, just getting things ready for recording for the podcast. Looks like people are already starting to chime in a little bit, getting some things set here. So bear with me. Tonight we're going to talk a little bit about picking up on the prohibited persons we talked about last time and getting into gifting for firearms. So I think it's the right time of year and people are starting to wonder about these kind of things. And yeah, that's what we'll cover. So just a few more administrative things here. A couple click. Derek, you're alone. Yes, you are, man. But thanks for joining me. We can do this together. I didn't bring a drink tonight. Oh, well, I'll pretend I have one. So cheers, Derek. Glad you're here with us. Let me get this going here. I'll share it over to the Firearms Radio Network page. And looks like someone else is coming on. Alrighty, I think we're getting all set up. Let me get the audio software getting recorded. Man, aren't you guys lucky you get all this extra amazing like early content? Okay. Get it started up. Get my intro ready. And here we go, guys. Thanks for tuning in. Welcome to the Trigger Words Podcast. This show is brought to you by the Firearms Radio Network and presented by Rocket FFL, your best source for getting and staying compliant with ATF rules and regulations. I'm going to start that over again, guys. You guys just saw blooper number 1. Where's the single malt I told you to have? I'm sorry, Eric. I let you down. I actually just got done drinking a single malt, if you believe it or not. Stronacci. I don't know how to pronounce it. I just had it, though. We're going to start that recording over. You all get to see behind the scenes. All right, here we go. Let's try it again. Maybe that's the single malt problem, Eric. I'm having to do it again. All right, we'll try it again. Welcome to the Trigger Words Podcast. This show is brought to you by the Firearms Radio Network and presented by Rocket FFL, your best source for getting your FFL and staying compliant with ATF rules and regulations. This podcast focuses on the legal side of gun ownership in the firearms industry. We talk about guns, law, and politics. I'm your host, Ryan Kleckner. I'm a firearms attorney, but I'm not your attorney. Therefore, everything we discuss in this podcast is for your entertainment only and informational purposes only and is not legal advice. Also, if you guys haven't figured out yet, I mostly talk about federal laws. I'll get into some state laws in future episodes, but most of the time when I talk about the definitions of firearms, and I don't qualify it with in this state, I'm talking about federal law only. So, man, so glad to have you guys back. You guys, the support so far, and we're only on the 5th episode right now, has been amazing. You guys have been spreading the word, tuning in, downloading the show, sending in good feedback. I love it, guys. You can go to triggerwordspodcast.com if you'd like to submit questions or ideas for the show. Believe it or not, I'm getting them all, and I'm making a list, and I'm going through the ones that I think make the most sense in order. And tonight, my plan was to talk about some constitutional law basics, because we've talked about the basic definition of firearms and who can't have guns and what is a silencer and things like that, because we have to lay the groundwork for the rest of the stuff, right? Well, then I started thinking, well, I haven't gone far enough back. I haven't talked about the Bill of Rights. What does the Second Amendment mean? Does it really give us the right to bear arms? And the hint is no. The Constitution gives us no rights. But we'll save that for another topic, maybe the next episode if nothing comes up that's newsworthy to get into. But tonight I want to talk about something that's probably pertinent to some of you. It's gift giving. It's getting gifts. It's getting ready to get gifts. And if you guys are listening to this podcast, you probably like guns. So you wouldn't mind getting a gun as a present, or maybe even giving a gun as a present. You might have had questions of, how do I do that legally? How do I buy a gun from a gun store as a gift for somebody else? I mean, can I do that? The answer is yes. Yes, you can legally do that. And you also might have questions about guns that you already have in your possession, that you don't need to go to a gun store to buy. There's another way to handle that, depending on whether the person's in your state or they're in another state, how you handle if you're going to ship the firearm. So let's break that down. Let's first start with, if you're buying a gun for somebody else from a gun store, you got to be very careful, because there's a question on the form 4473. If you haven't heard that term yet, you know the form when you've gone to a gun store to buy a gun. That's the number for the form that you got to fill out as the purchaser of a gun. That puts your information on the top half of the front of the page, and then you have to answer a series of questions on the bottom half of the front of the page. And then you turn it over to the back, you sign the top, certifying that the information is correct. And then the FFL, or the gun dealer, then takes and fills out the information about the gun, and if necessary, in your state, runs the background check. So that form is by far the most scrutinized form by the ATF or FFLs during these compliance inspections. So they can get in a lot of trouble with those. And I spent a lot of time on Rocket FFL trying to explain to people how to do this form right, how to stay out of trouble with this form. And it's not just staying out of trouble. I mean, as gun owners, we should abhor the criminal misuse of firearms more than anybody else. So this is also our last line of defense to make sure that criminals don't get the guns. So this kind of stuff is important. Well, on that form, if you've paid attention to the questions, you have a question 11A, the first question of all the yes-no questions when you go down the form, and it asks, are you the actual transferee/buyer of the firearm listed on this form? Warning, you are not the actual transferee or buyer if you're acquiring the firearms on behalf of another person. And if you're not the actual transferee or buyer, the licensee cannot transfer the firearms to you. So in plain words, that says, are you really the purchaser of this firearm? Because if you're not, and you're buying this for somebody else, you can't get the gun. And the FFL can't give it to you. Well, I just said that you can legally buy a gun as a gift for somebody else, so that doesn't make any sense, right? Well, there's actually an exception to this. There is, exception is the wrong word. I'm already going to backpedal a little bit. There's a nuance here that we need to be careful of. It doesn't ask, are you the intended recipient of the firearm? Right? It doesn't say, is the firearm for you? Instead, it says, are you the actual transferee/buyer? Transferee meaning the person that is receiving this gun, or more importantly, let's just focus on the word buyer. Are you the actual buyer of this firearm? The person buying the firearm is not necessarily the person that's going to end up with it. I can imagine a scenario where that's true. I don't know, a gift, right? So if you're actually giving a real gift, what the law calls a bona fide gift, you're buying it, but you're intending to give it to somebody else. Now, what happens if that person reimburses you? Even if they reimburse you with another gift, well, then it's not really a gift, right? So if I buy a gun for somebody as a quote-unquote gift, and we know that the plan that we arrange with this other person is that in exchange, they're going to happen to give me something worth the same amount as the gun. Well, it doesn't even have to be the same amount, but if I'm giving them that gun as a gift on the condition that they give me something else, well, then it's not really a gift. In that case, you can get in very serious trouble under federal law, because that would be a straw purchase. Now, a straw purchase is tough because typically people think a straw purchase is when you're just buying a gun for somebody who's not allowed to otherwise have one. That's not necessarily true. It's when you're hiding the fact that you're not really the one buying the gun. So if you pay for it, great, but if someone else reimburses you, then they're actually the one paying for it. So you need to be careful about who's paying and who the intended recipient is, and making sure you're not doing a straw purchase. So let's talk about a straw purchase real quick. Well, in the last episode, we covered who prohibited persons were. They're the types of people that are not allowed to possess firearms or ammunition. And you need to go back and listen to episode 4 if you want to go through all the categories. But there are things like people like felons can't have firearms. Well, the instructions in the 4473 actually allow for gifts and explain it even better in the ATF's words if you want. For question 11A, I'm not going to read you the whole paragraph, so I'm going to read you the kind of a summary first and then the pertinent section I want to see, but I'll have it up in the show notes, the entire text for you. The instructions for question 11A say, when you're determining the actual transfer buyer, and for the purposes of this form, a person is the actual transfer buyer if he or she is purchasing the firearm for him or herself or otherwise acquiring the firearm for him or herself. Well, of course, got it. But then the relevant part for us here is a person is also the actual transferring buyer if he or she is legitimately purchasing the firearm as a bona fide gift for a third party. A gift is not bona fide if another person offered or gave the person completing this form money, services, or items of value to acquire the firearm for him or her, or if the other person is prohibited by law from receiving or possessing the firearm. Notice it didn't say it's a problem if they're a prohibited person. It says if it's a problem if you're filling out the form and you're saying that you're the buyer and you're really not. And it's also a problem if they're a prohibited person. So be careful with that distinction. Well, the problem with the prohibited person distinction, too, is you don't really have to worry that much about it. And I just slowed down when I said that because I'm regretting saying it as soon as I did. I mean, you need to worry that the person's a prohibited person, but really, truly, honestly with yourself, there's no way you're ever going to know that somebody else is not a prohibited person. Even if this person is your local police officer and you know they must have passed background checks, that doesn't mean they didn't get in trouble in the meantime. That doesn't mean there's not a chance they lied about something to become a police officer or to get their CCW or things like that. So you need to be careful, but at the same time, you might be able to relax a little bit. So let's talk about that nuance. You are allowed to buy a gift firearm for somebody else. The requirements are that when you fill out the form, you're honest on the form. And for that question 11A, where it asks if you're the actual purchaser, if it's a true gift, then yes, you are the purchaser of the firearm, even though you're not the intended recipient. You buy the firearm as the gift. You go to the person's house. You have Christmas together, and you say, "Merry Christmas. Here's your gun that's a gift." The only requirement for you is you have to have no reason to know that they're a prohibited person. Now, this can be a little tough, right? So I can know a friend for a very long time and not know that they, I don't know, ever renounced their U.S. citizenship. That is one thing that makes you a prohibited person, after all. There's a lot of nuances there that I would never know about somebody, even that I knew very well, especially if they wanted to lie to me about it. So I could always say, if heaven forbid I did that and they did something bad with the gun and the ATF got to look into it and said, "Well, Ryan, what were you thinking? You just gave a gun to a prohibited person." I'm going to have to say, I had no idea. But it's not only just that I had no idea, it's that I had no reason to know. I can't just put my fingers in my ears and willfully look the other way and try and pretend like I don't know. It's if I should have known or reasonably should have known they're a prohibited person, I can get in trouble. So I guess what I'm saying on one hand is you could never truly know anyway about somebody, so just only do it to somebody that you trust, that you'd be willing to risk a potential criminal misuse of a firearm. But on the other hand, even if you do think that it's okay because you have no reason to know, it's not really whether you knew or not. It's whether you can prove that you didn't know, right? So as the ATF comes to me and says, "Ryan, why'd you buy that person a firearm? They're a prohibited person." And I say, "Oh my gosh, I had no idea." It's not a measure of whether I really had no idea. It's whether I'm going to be able to convince the ATF I didn't have an idea, because they might think it was obvious and I should have known, and now I have a legal battle that I didn't want to get in the first place. So the nuance here is buy a gift that's a firearm from a gun store for somebody else, no problem, as long as you have no reason to believe that that person is a prohibited person and that they're not reimbursing you in any way. It's an actual, true, bona fide gift. There's a recent Supreme Court case about this where the person was buying a firearm for their father, and even though the father was allowed to get the gun on his own, the son filled out the form because he was trying to get a discount, and he put that he was the actual purchaser, even though the father was giving him the money, which means the son wasn't the actual purchaser, which means the son lied on a federal form and got into serious trouble. So that's the other problem with straw purchases is the straw purchase is when very typically it is a girlfriend or significant other of a felon that can't get the gun. So this guy goes into the gun store. He finds the gun that he wants and likes, and he goes out in the parking lot and he tells his girlfriend to go in there and buy gun XYZ. And unfortunately, those girls may not realize that they're actually the one breaking the law too. So of course the prohibited person is breaking the law, but the person that's going in to do a straw purchase for the other person, the person that's actually conducting the paperwork, even though they are allowed to possess a firearm, they are committing a serious federal crime by making that straw purchase. So that's why the NSSF has a great campaign called Don't Lie for the Other Guy. It's trying to warn and educate people on, hey, this isn't just a problem for them. It's a problem for you too. You can end up in jail. So, and FFLs have a serious responsibility to do the best they can to stop straw purchases. Now, the problem with trying to stop a straw purchase is at its heart, it's deception. The person is lying. It's hard to tell. So here's some tips and tricks to look at. Is if the person's very nervous about the transaction, if the person obviously has no idea about the firearm at all, the person pulls out a slip of paper out of their pocket and reads off of it, the description of the firearm. I actually just saw a interesting TV series where they had a perfect example of a straw purchase, and it escapes me right now who it was or even what the name of the series is, but I'm going to find it and I'm going to put it in the show notes for you guys so you guys can go check it out. You'll get a clip on there and see a perfect straw purchase where the guy goes in with just a piece of paper, just reads off of it what he needs to get, and the salesman does nothing to question it. So if the person, the firearm doesn't match them and all those kind of things, that's a sure sign of a straw purchase. But you know what the problem with that is? That's also the sure sign of a gift. Right? If my wife walks into a gun store and doesn't know about a certain firearm and instead is reading off of a piece of paper because she knows the gun I might want as a gift, man, that's just what I described as a potential straw purchase, right? So it can be very, very tough to know what's a straw purchase versus what's a gift. So what do? You use gift certificates. If you're an FFL or you know an FFL, tell them, stop doing gift purchases. Stop it. It's a bad idea. And instead sell gift certificates. And those make good business sense anyway, because a gift certificate, one, allows the recipient to come in and actually get the gun they truly want, so there's no mistakes and not problems with returns. And it allows the business to do an upsell, allows them to sell ammunition and accessories and training and all these other things that may have never been purchased by the person giving the gift. That's one good reason. Another good reason is gift certificates sometimes just aren't used. Right? You're getting the money now for something potentially in the future. There's just some news that I put up on the Rocket FFL blog about the NFA wait times are just crashing and falling to super short. It's amazing. I'm so excited about it. So I predict that a boom in silencer sales is coming, which is why I'm trying to get people to get their FFLs now so they can capitalize on that. Well, another way to do that is when they come in to try and get a silencer for you and you just got an FFL, and you need to wait to get it, purchased from the distributor, is do a gift certificate. That way you get the money now and you can order the gun. So there's all these benefits to gift certificates. And even if a straw purchase is going on, and even if there still might be something shady about the transaction, at least with the gift certificate, the person who's ending up with the gun is still the one filling out the form. Right? So if a transaction seems fishy to any gun dealer, they have the legal right to and they have the legal obligation to stop the transaction. Okay, but if they're still not sure, but it seems legit, but it's questionable, if you do a gift certificate, then the person comes in and they're filling out the form themselves, so at least the background check has been being run on them. Now, be careful. If you're thinking about this, you just recognized how you could do kind of a reverse straw purchase with gift certificates. So you can get, in trouble. You can have the guy come in that's prohibited and buy the gift certificate and give it to the girlfriend to come in and get the gun. So you still need to watch for a mix match, right? If she comes in to redeem the gift certificate and she gets gun XYZ and has no idea about anything of the gun, but the guy that bought the gift certificate does, okay, maybe raise some more questions, but at least that's a better way to do it. So we know you can buy a gun for somebody else as long as they don't have any reason, you don't have any reason to believe that they're a prohibited person and they don't reimburse you. Now, how do you give them the gun? How do you get the gun from your possession to them? Well, you bought it. It's actually your gun. It's not theirs yet. So once you get the gun and you're done with the transfer paperwork and you take it out of the gun store and you go to walk away with it, how you get that gun to the recipient is the same way you would actually get a gun from your current inventory. So let's say you had an older gun that you had or a family heirloom or something that you wanted to give as a gift. Well, starting from here on out in the advice, the instructions are exactly the same, because when you walk out of the gun store with a new gun, it's now yours, just like the one you have at home. So how do you give a gun that is yours to somebody else? Well, hopefully they're in the same state, because it makes it a lot easier. And of course, you need to follow the other rules too. You need to make sure they're old enough to be able to have and possess the gun on their own and things like that. But simply, you want to give me a gun and you get invited to my Christmas party, you can show up with the gun and say, here you go, Ryan, Merry Christmas. And I can unwrap it and say, wow, a gun. At the federal level, there's no paperwork needed. There's no transfer needed. There's no anything. Now, you should keep good records. This is just personal records that you can choose to never show to law enforcement at all. But I would like to have, at least in case the ATF or the police came and say, Ryan, where's this gun? It was just used in a crime. I'd like to say, oh, I gave it to somebody for Christmas, but who was it? Well, I'd like to have some paperwork to remember. But you can just give it to them. That's it. You're within the same state. Now, be very careful. Some states, and you should know if you're in one of these states, because you know you have some tough gun laws, require that you do transfers through an FFL, which means you can even bring the gun to the Christmas party. And you can say, hey, look, here's the gun I'm giving you. Too bad. We have to go to an FFL tomorrow to get this thing transferred to you. But you can do something like that, or that's, again, where the gift certificate works out pretty well, unless you previously owned the gun. So be careful. Know your state's rules. Now, what if the person lives in your same state, they're a resident of your state, and you're going to give them the firearm, but they live on the other side of the state, and you're not going to see them in person? Can you ship it to them in the mail? Well, yes. You can ship firearms in the mail or through common carriers like UPS and FedEx, but they have their own special rules. We're going to cover those in just a second. But the real question is, can you ship it to them in the mail or through common carrier? I'll just say ship it to them without using an FFL. If they're in the same state and they're a resident of your state and you don't have state laws that prohibit it, yes, under federal law, you can actually ship a gun straight to somebody else in your own state. Why? Because it's not an interstate transfer. So the federal law only applies to transfers between another state and your state. If it's within the same state, the ATF, this is a little overstating the issue, but they really kind of don't have a say anymore because it's within your same state. It's as if you met the person. Now, should you do that? No, you shouldn't do that, because I think there's too much risk of it getting lost, or if it doesn't go through an FFL and do they leave it on the doorstep and a kid gets it. I'm just saying, technically, transfers within the same state under federal law you can do. Now, if you have to ship it interstate, you have to ship it to another state, you must go through an FFL. Now, that's actually going to make it easier for shipping, because there's no law that says when a gun is shipped that you have to have an FFL, but the common carriers that we use, FedEx and UPS, have internal rules, which is not the law, but their own internal rules that say they want an FFL involved in the transaction. Like, we'll cover this maybe in a future episode, but I can ship a gun to myself across the country. Perfectly legal. I can walk into UPS and say, ship this to the Palazzo Hotel in Las Vegas for SHOT Show, to Ryan Kleckner, care of the Palazzo Hotel, and be a firearm, and I can ship it. And then I can drive to the airport and then fly to Las Vegas. I can even fly to Las Vegas a day later, a couple days later, and the box can be waiting for me at the front desk, and I can go pick it up. It's perfectly legal to ship a firearm to yourself across state lines because there's no transfer taking place. It's being to me. And I'll cover the details of how to do it later, but how I said the address was very specific for a reason. Like I said, we'll get into later. We won't get into now. So the federal law allows shipment without an FFL being involved in certain circumstances, but UPS and FedEx require that an FFL is involved until they don't require it, meaning some employees just don't ask. But you have to tell them. There actually is a law that says when you ship a firearm, you must notify the carrier that it contains a firearm. So I know some of you think you're getting cute when you want to ship a firearm through UPS and you walk in and say, oh, it is a lead delivery device, or it is an industrial tool, and you want to lie to them. That's your choice. You're not just getting over on UPS. You're breaking a law. The law says you must notify them. Now, I don't know how they would ever prove that you didn't notify them. I'm just trying to give you the facts as they are. So that's another reason I like having an FFL, by the way. When I travel across the country with firearms, it's just so much easier for me to stop by UPS store, say, hey, I want to ship this firearm to somebody. And they'll say, oh, you can't do that. You need to have an FFL. And I pull out a copy of my FFL and say, this is me. Also, things you need to be aware of, like the U.S. mail, you can ship a long gun, but not a handgun as a non-FFL. And there's certain other restrictions, and each one of them, and we'll cover it again, have how the box can or can't be marked and the ammunition in or out of it. There's no federal law, contrary to popular belief, that you can't have ammunition in with the package of the gun. A lot of people think that's a rule. It's not. That's not a law at all. Not a ATF regulation, but your common carrier might have that rule or how ammunition needs to be stored and stuff like that. So I like having the FFL because it's just kind of leave me alone, got an FFL. I have repeatedly walked into the U.S. Post Office with guns to ship to either customers or to send them out to things because as an FFL, I like using actually U.S. mail more because their insurance claim process is easier to navigate for the actual replacement value of the gun. So I will walk into a U.S. Post Office past all the no firearms allowed signs, holding firearms in my arms, not out in the open, but in a box. And I walk up to the front counter and I say, hey, got a gun here. I'd like to declare that I'm shipping a firearm. And sometimes they panic. You go, oh, I'm an FFL. And then all that panic goes away. So we will cover those details later. But the point is, if you're going interstate, I don't care if you're driving an interstate. If you're going interstate, you need to use an FFL because that would be an interstate transfer. So transfer from one state's resident to another state's resident. So what you do when you go to ship it to an FFL is one, coordinate, plan with the FFL ahead of time so they know that they're expecting a firearm and who it's going to be for, especially who it's going to be for. So what you should do is when you ship a firearm to an FFL, first call them. You find the FFL local to the recipient. You coordinate with them that they're willing to do the transfer and that the recipient is willing to pay the transfer fee, or maybe you can pay the transfer fee or whatever it is. And when you put the gun in the box, you should take a photocopy of your driver's license and put that in with the gun. That's because the FFL that receives the gun has to list where they got the gun from, and that includes the name and address of you, which should be on your driver's license. So you put the photocopy of your driver's license in the gun box. You should also then put a note saying, this is coming from me. It is for Joe Smith. Here's Joe Smith's number. He's coming to pick it up. And also leave your phone number or email address or something so they can get hold of you, the gun dealer, if they have any questions. Then the gun dealer can handle the transaction for you and everything can go smoothly. You'd be surprised at how many firearms are sitting collecting dust in the back of a gun dealer's office because they got a firearm in the mail and they have no idea who it came from and no idea who it's for, but they're holding on to it just in case someone comes in to try to claim it later and it's a pain for them. So make sure you put the information on there that matters, and especially contact information so they can get a hold of you. So I hope that helps. Christmas time is coming up, or whatever holiday you want to celebrate. And if you want to give a firearm as a gift, be careful. If you're buying it from a gun shop, you're allowed to, and you need to actually check yes to question 11A. You are the actual purchaser of the firearm. If it's a bona fide gift, just to make sure that you have no reason to believe that the intended recipient is a prohibited person. Now, also, you could buy a firearm not as a gift, take the firearm out into the parking lot, have instant buyer's remorse, and say, you know what? I don't want this gun anymore. I want to sell it. That's fine. Ironically, I don't know ironically, but maybe it's silly. That's perfectly legal, right? So I have Joe Smith out in the parking lot. Okay, I cannot say, hey, Joe, I'm going to go get you a gun, and I'm going to come out and you're going to give me the money for it, okay? And he goes, okay. Then I walk in and get the gun, and I walk out to the parking lot, and Joe Smith gives me the money, and I give him the gun. That's a straw purchase. But technically, legally, I can walk in the store, buy the gun, walk out and go, hey, Joe, check out my cool gun. You know, I don't think it's that cool after all. I kind of regret buying it. And maybe I should sell it. And Joe goes, man, I like it. I'll take it, and hands me the money. I sell it to Joe. That's fine. It all comes down to your intent at the time. Don't play that game, though, guys, because, again, it doesn't come down to what your actual intent was. It comes down to what intent you can prove. So you don't want anyone to get in trouble, including yourself, and you don't want the criminal misuse of firearms, or at least I hope you don't. So I'm seeing some comments on here that I'm trying to keep up with, and I don't want to ruin it too much in the podcast, but I want to encourage people coming on. Laugh out loud. If he passes out sitting there, I think the 9 of us in here should get a free Rocket FFL. Am I looking that tired, guys? Is it that late? Yeah, it is late. So I hope we covered the details you guys wanted to know. I hope this helps you this Christmas. I hope this keeps you out of trouble. I really appreciate you guys tuning in. And I'm sorry the podcast is short, but not that sorry, because I want to keep doing it. And the reason I'm doing it is I'm covering a lot of information in these podcasts, and sometimes I talk a little quick. And I hear people asking for me to repeat things sometimes, or that it's a lot for them to digest. So keeping the podcast to about a half hour, I think allows me to get one topic, knock it out, and then save the next one for the next. So I'm happy you guys came in and joined us on this. We have more people following along the Facebook Live than I expected, and I can't even keep up with the comments. So after this podcast is over, I'll address the comments. So if you're just listening to this podcast, check out the Facebook page for trigger words, and you can join in on the live videos too. Thanks again, everybody. Take care. Okay, Facebookers, still looking at me. The podcast is done recording, so let me try and get some of these comments here. Give them Rocket FFL, Eric. I'd love to, but that kind of negates the business part of it, right? You have a problem with the podcast? Episode 4's got a problem. Looks like Firearms Radio Network's in here. Sean Heron is saying he listened to it today, and it's working. I don't know. Chris Davis, am I still thinking of a subscription-type legal service? Absolutely. That's what Rocket FFL is going to morph into. So stay tuned. It'll get there. I just don't know how I'm going to handle the time because I have way too many projects and things going on right now. Or pay for a gun, give an empty box, have them pick up the gun and do the 4473. No, because the person doing the 4473, Eric, could not check that they're the actual purchaser of the firearm because they didn't pay for it. That would actually be a serious problem. So don't pay for the gun and then have the person come and do it. But if you gave them a gift certificate, you've given them that money, and they can choose to spend that on whatever they want. And because they're choosing to spend it on a gun, now they're actually paying for it. I know that's a little bit of a nuance, but it works. Yeah, Ernie said you can do Visa gift cards. Is absolutely right. You can even give them cash and a birthday card and say, hey, this is for you to go get a gun, whatever you want to do. I just like the gift certificate for the FFLs. Zach asked, if you don't have an FFL, are you still allowed to send a gun at the post office? I thought it was a federal law that you can't have weapons on the property. Yeah, that's true, but there's actually some exceptions to that. So, Zach, I will do the whole episode maybe next if there's not anything pressing coming up about how to ship firearms more specifically. We'll cover it there for you, man. Derek says, laugh out loud, if he passes out sitting there, I think the 9 of us in here should get a free Rocket FFL. I got to know what you meant by that, man. I'm exhausted. Was I looking that tired? Is that why you're saying that? Dustin says, first rule showbiz, always leave them wanting more. That's funny. No, we give them Rocket FFL as a gift. That's just the dealer transfer. Okay, I don't understand that one, Eric. No, we give them... Yeah, if everyone gets an FFL, that's true, Eric. That's a good point. Yeah, if you all get FFLs, this makes this really, really simple. Matter of fact, you don't have to go into the gun store at all. You just go online to Lipsy's and be like, oh, this is the gun I want for really, really cheap, and buy it, and it gets shipped to you in 2 days with free shipping. It's like Amazon Prime with guns to your front door. I like doing it, but maybe you guys would too. Kevin, yes, get your FFL, man. You need to get it soon because if gun laws are coming, I would think you would want to maybe potentially be grandfathered in. There's no guarantee for it, but I would get it going. And Kevin, Rocket FFL, by the way, does not apply and get the FFL for you. Rocket FFL gives you the training you need to make the right decisions. So, Kevin, you might want to consider just starting the training now because as many of the customers of Rocket FFL have figured out, through the training, they've stopped and went, oh, I didn't realize I need to kind of do this, or I didn't realize that I needed to, maybe I should form an LLC first. So at least it'll give you the knowledge now what to do, and then you can get it someday soon. You don't have to get it now. Tate asked, wouldn't be this change if it was a son buying a gun from the father, and the father bought it for the son? If any of that came out weird, it's because I'm using talk to text on my road trip home. It came out weird, Tate. I don't know what you mean. Would this change if it was a son buying a gun from the father that the father bought for the son? Well, so let's say if the father bought a gun for the son and he didn't get reimbursed for it, then he's the actual purchaser, okay? And then later, he went to give it to the son, and the son said, absolutely not, I cannot accept this gift. I'll buy the gun from you if you want, though. And the father said, okay, I guess you can buy the gun after all. I guess I'll sell it. I could see that being legal because that was not the intent at the time. I'd be careful about that, though. Tate said, how soon can I start rocking fail to get my FFL? The talk to text isn't working. How soon can you start, I guess, applying for your FFL? You're turning 21 here pretty quick. Can you start any of that right now, or do you have to wait till you turn 21? Well, you have to wait till you're 21 to apply for the FFL. as you'll find out in the course, I mean, this is the bad news. There's plenty to do before you actually apply. Now, if you wanted to, you could knock the course out and apply and be done in a few hours. But if you want to do it right and you take your time and go through the courses and do all the things I recommend, you can get prepped now and have the application ready, turn 21, sign it, and send it off, and you'll be off to the races. But the things that are going to take some time for you to take are going to be things that I talk about, and there's a whole chapter just on business formation. Do you want a business? What kind of business do you want? How should you get that business? The pros and cons. So you can be doing all those things now completely. The only requirement for 21 is to get the actual FFL, so you can get all the business and stuff set up first. So hey, everybody, glad you tuned in. I appreciate it. Derek, you still owe me an answer on what you meant. You're confusing me. I'm passing out. I appreciate the support, guys. Seriously, if you want to thank me or the Firearms Radio Network for this free information you're getting, the way you can do that is by going and telling other people about it. Getting them to download it onto their devices is what gives us the numbers and is what helps us out. So thanks again, everybody. I'll talk to you next week.